200,000 subs, you know what that means. It's time for a Q&A. Media Monkey asks 2 questions. We'll do them one at a time. So, which dictator do you think was the most powerful or most influential? Good question. My gut feeling is Julius Caesar, because we still talk about him over 2,000 years after his reign, which, bear in mind, was less than 2 years. And if you start from when he was literally made dictator for life, then he ruled for only 1 month before everything was abruptly cut short by another infamous name, Brutus. And of course, we all know the story today about him being murdered on the Senate floor, and the big question about whether or not Brutus was a defender of the rule of law and republican values, or was he a traitor who stabbed his best friend and basically father to death under the shadow of his old nemesis, Pompey. Julius Caesar is the name that comes to mind whenever one considers dictators. But he really wasn't that powerful. I mean, at his height, he only ruled over maybe 6 or 7 million people, basically a micronation by today's standards. Meanwhile, Pinochet ruled over nearly double that number, but less than half a century after he was gone, his name more or less slipped into irrelevance. If we're talking strictly historical dictators, then the numbers point to an obvious candidate who's on the other side of the world and a completely different time period to Julius Caesar, Mao Zedong, who ruled over just under 1 billion people during the 20th century. All that begs the question, what does history remember? The scale or the story? I think it's almost always the latter, so my answer remains Caesar. And you've also got the fact that without his little power grab, the Roman Empire, which influenced all of Europe for half a millennium, would have never emerged out of the fledgling republic. Question 2 of this thread is, would you say that this dictator is more likely to have been successful than others? No, I don't think so. I think all dictatorships are incompatible with genuine human development and societal progress. They can get things done, for sure, but at the cost of taking power away from everyday people. And societies that work best are ones that have invested resources and liberties into their citizenry. Uneducated, starving peasants can be shoved into a gold mine to extract resources, but proper economic and social development requires an educated populace with a stake in their community. However, technology is beginning to change this model. And we might see that in the future, you can combine authoritarian governance with long-term development, which some argue is what's happening today in China. Could new technology undo old ways of governance? We'll see. Perhaps in our brave new world, democracy will be impossible, maybe even undesirable, with our fancy new gear. Let's hope not. Taylor Gusta asks, what's the favourite part of your day? First thing in the morning is the favourite part of my day, when I get to have a coffee and a cigarette. Now obviously coffee and cigarette is a great combination by itself, but this is also the bit of the day where I can kind of just chill and think about what I'm going to research. I can read the comments to see what you guys are thinking and saying, and just generally get things going. Other than that, I like the bit once the day's over and I can have a drink, because again, that's me time. Cheers. And I think nothing quite tells the brain that you've finished work for the day like a cold beer does, or in this case, a G&T. Sometimes though, it's been known that I'll have a few too many, which brings me to the sponsor of today's video. As you guys know, I love diving into history, but let's be honest, when I enjoy a few drinks the night before, I don't always bounce back the next day. That's why I've started using ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic, the world's first genetically engineered probiotic, invented by PhD scientists to help with rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol produces a toxic byproduct in your gut called acetaldehyde. And it's actually this product, not dehydration, that's the real reason you feel lousy the next day. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol is designed to break that down, helping your body handle what it normally struggles with. It's simple. Make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, enjoy responsibly, and tomorrow you'll thank yourself. So, if you've got plans the next day, work, workouts, or just life, ZBiotics helps you feel your best. Plus, they offer free shipping and a 100% money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied. Check out my link in the description, zbiotics.com/flashback15 to get 15% off your first order. Again, that's zbiotics.com/flashback15. Take care of tomorrow by starting your night with ZBiotics. So yeah, coffee and cigarette or cold beer. Those are my favourite parts of the day. So anyway, that's their name, asks 2 questions. 1, you know battles like the liberation of Eindhoven, where the sides are insanely uneven, 2 Canadians versus 1,500 Germans, and the smaller force somehow still wins. How do those happen? Is it that they're better equipped, or was that just magic or something? Now, I don't know much, in fact I don't know anything about that particular battle. That's the first time hearing of it, and to be honest I don't really know much about military history, but I did used to be an air cadet, and you do learn quite a bit about how wars and battles are fought. The 2 things to bear in mind with a battle where there are insanely uneven odds are 2 things. 1, you don't actually need to annihilate every enemy soldier to win a particular fight or objective. You're there to do a job, hold a fort, or chase the enemy off of a part of the battlefield. The second thing is, fog of war is a real thing, and no one is always totally sure what capacities the other side has at their disposal. So, just 2 men fighting like absolute demons against a vastly superior force can get away with it if A, that enemy doesn't really want to die on that hill and doesn't feel like rolling the dice on it, or B, you can make your force appear larger or better equipped than it actually is. When I was a cadet, we were always told about this battle where the SAS had countless enemies trying to storm a fortress, and they were so outnumbered that they basically had to trick their way into victory. And they did this by lining up rifles along the wall and then firing one shot before moving to the next rifle to fire again, making the enemy think that there was hundreds of riflemen holding the fortresses. Making the enemy think there were hundreds of riflemen holding the fortress, all in different firing positions, not just a dozen or so men, or whatever it was supposed to be. I don't know if that story is true, but you get the point. They made themselves seem bigger than they actually were, and they fought hard enough that their opponents decided they didn't want the smoke anymore. Question 2 from this same person, so anyway, is what's your favourite history fact? And my favourite history fact is that spectacles, glasses, are absolutely overpowered, and that you can actually track late medieval Europe's insane economic development, the Renaissance, and the eventual Industrial Revolution to the invention of eyeglasses. See, most people struggle with their eyesight before they hit age 50, which means that before glasses, a massive proportion of your population fail to become economically productive if their jobs involve any reading or writing, because you need your eyes. And of course, it's not just the nerds who get here. That famous carpenter's motto of measure twice, cut once, doesn't really work if you can't actually see the ruler that you're measuring with. But if you give people glasses, then you can buy back another 20 or so years of labour from your most skilled and experienced craftsmen, merchants, cartographers, shipbuilders and scholars. Tiny little change, glasses, but it comes with absolutely enormous economic consequences. Lloyd E. Watson asks, out of the 14 Plantagenet kings, who's your favourite and why? Good question. So, for those who don't know, the Plantagenet kings were a royal dynasty that ruled England from about 1154 to the late 15th century. I'm going to say 1485. I might be wrong. Anyway, this dynasty started with Henry II, and the last one was Richard III. My favourite of these kings is obviously Henry V. I've got 2 videos of him on this channel because he's badass. He took an arrow to the face as a teenage boy, which he fully recovered from using some pretty revolutionary medieval surgery, at least by the standards of the time. Then he took the throne and went across the Channel to France to give the French a good kicking at Agincourt. Now, I'll be honest, he wasn't the best domestic king. He was great on the battlefield because, in all honesty, he was a bit of a thug. And in the end, his escapades in France came to nothing. But he is, nonetheless, absolutely iconic. What do you think, Lloyd? What are you going to say? Okay, Raphael asks, in one of your videos you said you were a performer. What kind of performing do you do? And does the Telecaster I've seen in some of your videos have something to do with it? Yes, well spotted. This is my Telecaster. It's a very nice guitar, and the only instrument I'll never sell. And that's because it's a custom guitar, which means there's nothing else exactly like it. It's made out of spare parts. That makes it practically worthless, but I think it's a great guitar nonetheless. Now, I'm not a guitarist, I was a bassist, and I'd say at about a semi-professional level. In fact, hopefully my wonderful editor Matea is showing you some clips of me playing with one of my old bands. That was a great gig and paid my bills for a couple of years until everyone's favourite pandemic came along and more or less destroyed that career. But hey, it is what it is. I prefer my job now. All's well that ends well. And I would actually still class what I'm doing right now as a kind of performance. I can't just sit here and talk in my normal voice. It would sound a bit like this with lots of ums and ahs, and it would be low energy and very boring. So it's a performance. Anyway, we're getting off topic. So teaching also is a performance. We're gone. Okay, Janula Lazzaro asks, top 10 bands/music artists. Now, I'm not going to do 10 because I'd be here all day to think of them. I don't really do favourites, but I'll give you 5. These aren't my favourites, but I'm listening to these a lot at the moment. So number 1 is Maya Belsitzman. She's an incredible cello player, and I use her music all the time in my videos because she's awesome. Number 2, Jake Worthington. This boy is bringing country back in all of its glory, and I'm here all the way. Number 3 is going to have to be Stevie Wonder because it's Stevie Wonder. He's the best. Number 4 would be Jan Tiersen. This guy wrote the score for Amelie, and whenever I hear that soundtrack, I feel all the feelings. For number 5, I'm going to have to go with Protest the Hero. They're a progressive metal band, and the reason is because their second album, Fortress, gets played in my house probably every week. Great for working. Okay, Non-Binary asks, what's your favourite piece of fake history? Could be something that was reported as fact, but has since been debunked, or was BS to begin with, but was held into as fact. My favourite would probably be the Siege of Caffa, recorded by the Italian Gabriele de Mussi. And basically, the story in this is that during the siege, the Mongols were suffering from plague, so they catapulted infected corpses over the city walls to infect the defenders. Then some Genoese fled Caffa by ship to Italy, bringing this plague with them, which sparked the European Black Death in the 14th century. As it turns out, Gabrielle wasn't actually there and wrote this account like a decade after the fact, and the plague doesn't actually spread that way either. It's mainly from rats and fleas, so it probably didn't happen, and if it did, that wasn't what caused the plague. But it is a great story, and when I was going to make a video on the plague, I wanted to start with this siege because it's just such a great way to kind of kick off the tale, but as it turns out, it was false. Which is probably good for the people who were alive at the time, but now, here as I am, trying to make interesting content, it was a bit sad that I couldn't use that one. Okay, Callum Hayes asks, any chance of getting your dad back on? I really enjoyed that tier list style episode. Well, Dad's on the naughty step for at least today, because on our last video together, he was pure chaos, and enjoy that as you might have. It was not fun for our production team, but yes, he will eventually be back. Mike asks 2 questions. Question 1, how much into history is your dad? Not much, really. Like anyone, he likes the stories, and he's quite interested in the history of religion, although I wouldn't really call him a scholar on it. He's pretty solid on the history of gospel music, and I think European jazz, although I might be wrong, sorry, Dad, if I am. But on history, no, it's not his strongest suit. Dad is quite good at more science things. His profession's in medicine, so that's where he shines. Question 2 is, what part of history do you know the least, but want to learn more about? And my answer here would be the French Revolution and Napoleon. I know it's important. I know that you can't really understand Europe without either of these 2 events in person, respectively. But I've never really looked into it. I still couldn't really tell you, for instance, what happened at the Battle of Waterloo. I know Napoleon lost, but that's about it. And of course, the French Revolution completely changed the political landscape and sort of created the bedrock for what we recognise as our modern, shiny liberal democracies now. But I really don't know much about it other than that the guillotine was used a lot. So I'm going to do some homework on. My plan is to do some homework on that this year, because I think if I'm going to run a history channel, I should understand this bit of history a lot more. Okay, Angrily Ooze asks, why did you decide to move away from the UK? And do I have any advice for people who want to do the same? So I left the UK in 2022 to go and teach history in Thailand. I was already a history teacher at the time, but I was very unsatisfied with my life back in the UK, and I got offered a job and thought I'd take it. Since then, I've more or less permanently lived abroad. I've been back to the UK a few times, but each time I go, it seems to be worse than I remembered it. I'm not sure if that's the UK declining. I know that's a very popular narrative. I'm not sure it's true. Again, I don't live there. It could also be that I just think that life abroad is nicer. And so when you go back, all of your nostalgia is kind of crumbled in the face of reality. Is that just the good old days myth playing games with you, or is there actually a genuine decline in the UK? I'm not sure. Ironically, despite thinking all of this, I'm actually thinking of moving back to the UK full time. Now that I've been relieved of the drudgery of my old job, I can actually spend more time with family and friends, which is the reason for living, and I feel like that would be nice. And I also feel like I kind of owe it to England to go back and try and make things better by simple things like spending money on small businesses there and taking an interest in the local community. That being said, 12 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to afford a half-decent lifestyle in the UK, let alone frequent small businesses, so I do totally understand why others might want to leave. My advice, if you're looking to jump ship, is do teaching. Go teach somewhere. That's a great start, and you don't actually need that much to get going. If you really don't want to teach, try and make money somehow online. And then once you have a reliable income, go somewhere cheap. Best of luck. Drisdale Milburn asks, who would be your 3 guests for lunch at Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips? Theirs would be Rasputin, Babe Ruth, and Howard Hughes. Those are some good choices. I'm not sure I'd want Rasputin fingering my chips. God knows when he would have last washed his hands, but nonetheless, I see it. I see the vibe. As long as knives and forks are used, I suppose. For those who don't know, Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips was an enormous fish and chip restaurant chain in the US. It had nearly 1,000 stores in the 1970s, but as of 2025, I think there's only 4 left. Good things never last. So, anyway, as I sat down for my dinosaur-era plate of fried fish and mushy peas under the shadow of a dying chippy empire, eating the cuisine of a dead empire, who would sit with me? Now, there's a question. My first thought would probably be the late, great Christopher Hitchens, but I fear that he might dominate conversation and make it impossible for the other diners to actually get a word in, so he'd be on my list if it was a kind of one-to-one dinner date affair. As for a kind of 4-top dining experience, I think I'm going to go with the British comedian David Mitchell, because he's funny and I like his work. Spot 2 is going to the legendary Anthony Bourdain, because if I'm going to have to talk over a meal and about food, he has to be there. And then lastly, George Orwell, because I've always wondered if he was as good in conversation as he was on the page, and I'd be deeply curious to get his take on the modern world. Would he find our abundance and liberty a success, or would he be horrified at the level of surveillance that we subject ourselves to in this wonderful digital world? My guess is that he'd be surprised we still have so much freedom in the face of all these gadgets that will be enough to make even Big Brother blush. Plus, Orwell never actually visited the US, and since Arthur Treacher's is an American chain serving English food, a type of cuisine that Orwell famously wrote in defence of, then I'd finally get to hear his opinion on English food and the Stars and Stripes. Travisor asks, ever considered a collab with real-time history? No, I haven't considered a collab with Real Time History, but I'm down. If you know them, let them know that. John asks, which history books do I recommend? Well, it depends. When I do read, which I don't do as much as I should these days, I tend to read philosophy or literature that's to do with the topic or time that I'm interested in. Recently, I've been reading Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. That's political philosophy, but written during the English Civil War. I've also just finished Elie Wiesel's Night, which is a heartbreaking, mainly literary, not historical piece on his experiences during the Holocaust. And I actually want to make a video on this book because the writing is just gorgeous, there's another way to say it. I've also got a soft spot for graphic novels, so if you find a book called Mouse, grab it. Fantastic Holocaust story in a digestible form. If you want to read like straight history though, which I don't do as much of as I should, then you'll probably already know these recommendations are very milquetoast, but seriously, you can't go wrong with these guys. Tom Holland, especially his book Dominion for the history of Christianity and Western civilization. Anything Anthony Beevor wrote, particularly Stalingrad and the Battle of Berlin, are both fantastic reads for some really good, thorough World War II history that's very morally charged and makes you feel things. And Dan Jones. Basically anything Dan Jones has written is great for medieval stuff. Very readable and very insightful. Right, guys, that's it for today. We will do something else like this soon. Dad might be around next month, not sure yet. In the meantime, thank you so much for your support and for watching these videos. It really, really means the world to me, and I can't say it enough. It's not good on YouTube to spend lots of time yammering on about thank yous because people get bored and click away, but really, if it was up to me, I would have a 5-minute thank you video because it's not possible without you. So really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your summer, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.